Hey guys, how's it going? CoreData here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be playing some more Elder Scrolls Legends. We're not going to be playing, actually. We're going to be talking about the Elder Scrolls Legends. I'm just so used to that fucking intro. It automatically comes out even when I start my stream. But yeah, we're going to be talking about the Elder Scrolls Legends today. This is going to be a character discussion video. As you might have guessed from the title of the video and or the thumbnail, we're going to be discussing game balance today. This is obviously, before we start, this is all hypothetical. This is all things that I wish we could have seen before the game stopped being developed or had stopped been worked on. I don't think any of that was grammatically correct, but it's fine. I'm really tired, by the way. I'm sorry. But yeah, these are just changes I wish we had gotten. These are changes I would have liked to have seen personally. You'll probably know that because a lot of these are pet cards of mine that I just want them back. But yeah, this video we're going to be talking about unnerfs that could have possibly happened, cards that might have been safe to have been reverted back to how they used to be, cards that should be nerfed, and cards that could potentially have been buffed. Well, there's only one card on here I think I have down for a buff, but it would help the decks that it goes into quite a bit. So yeah, this is just a bit of a strange video. I just felt like making it. It's been on my mind for a while. I had a discussion in my Discord, and some people brought up some very good points and some interesting cards. So yeah, remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that good shit, and tell me how wrong I am in the comments below. So yeah, the first thing I'm going to talk about are cards that could have been unnerfed, or cards that could have been reverted and had maybe their nerf changed to make them not unplayable. And the first card on here, to no one's surprise, is Supreme Atromancer. Supreme Atromancer is a card that got nerfed a very long time ago. It got nerfed, I think it was before Heroes of Skyrim came out, or it was just after. I think it was before, because I remember people dropped Atromancers from their decks, and then it got replaced by Incano. Yeah, a card that got nerfed a very long time ago, and a card that never should have been nerfed in the first place. This card got nerfed mainly for the same reasons that Rage got nerfed. There was just a large outcry of people complaining that they were losing to Atromancer, which is kind of the point of the card. The entire purpose of it was to end games. It was a finisher, in the same way that Incano is, that Tazcat is. It's supposed to be a mid-range and control top end, but people just kept complaining about it, and it eventually got pushed from 9 to 10. So the one change I would love to see is Atromancer back to 9. I think the game was never in a state where 9-mana Atromancer wasn't okay. It would allow Mirk Battle Mage to become a proper deck again, as opposed to being fringe, as it is now. It would give it like mid-range Dominion a decent top-end closing tool, as well as giving like some other fringe decks like mid-range Assassin and stuff like that more tools to play with in the current metagame. Because mid-range Assassin is a deck that suffered massively throughout the years. It got a lot of its tools hit, just coincidentally, the same way like Doomcrag got a bunch of tools randomly hit, because other decks were abusing them. The next card I'd love to see unnerfed is Histgrove. Histgrove, I think, it's been safe to come back for a very long time. There's enough support removal in the metagame for it to not really be an issue. 2 8/8s on turn fucking like what 12, 15, like turn 12, turn 13. It's not really that impactful nowadays when you think about how fast the metagame's gotten with Goblins, Dwem Crab, and then all like just a decent mid game that decks have access to. I mean, Alfiq just wrecks Scout anyway. So yeah, I don't think Histgrove is really a problematic card. It was problematic at the time. I'll happily admit that. Ramp Scout in general at the time was very oppressive. It was the Dragon Ramp build back during Clockwork City that ended up getting Histgrove and Thorn Histmage nerfed. But I really do think Histgrove back to 3 would at least allow it to see some play in certain decks. Because at 4 mana, it's just way too slow. You're losing so much tempo. Again, it's the Mundus Stone situation where you're spending turn 4 to develop a support that just doesn't do anything. So yeah, no, I think Histgrove would be perfectly fine at 3 again. I would welcome it back with open arms. Next up, I want to talk about Goblin Skull. Goblin Skull got nerfed from a 2-mana 2/2 to a 3-mana 2/3. With the exact same effect. Skull got nerfed because of Telvanni conscription, if I'm not mistaken. Telvanni was making insane use of Skull to tutor up Cruel Firebloom, giving Telvanni just constant access to really good removal between like negations, bolts, reverberating strikes. You had the Fireblooms, you had Sanctuary Pet, you had Viper, you had Necromancers to recycle all that shit. Telvanni just didn't have removal. And Skulk was a big contributing factor to that. But instead of nerfing any of the specific cards that was making conscription really good, they decided to hit Skulk, which inadvertently killed a lot of mid-range green, because for those of you who might not have been around at the time, Skulk tutoring up curses to allow you to play Leaf Lurker on curve was a very, very important staple of the metagame for a very long time, especially in back when we only had core set and also in Skyrim. It's what allowed mid-range assassin and mid-range archer to be really, really good. It led to so many like really high tempo turns that allowed assassin and archer to get ahead. And by hitting Skulk, you also inadvertently hit those tempo decks that weren't a problem, that weren't causing any issues. They were just decent options. So by killing Skulk, you killed those decks specifically. And I mean, if you think about nowadays, how many mid-range archers and mid-range assassins you see around? Pretty much none. It's all aggro or move. So Skulk going to 3 mana just made it far too slow for mid-range to really make any use of it. And it still sees play occasionally in Telvanni, even as a 3 mana 2/3, just because Firebloom, just fetching Firebloom for free is insane. And it also sees Fringe playing Goblins. I don't think it's correct in Goblins, it's really slow, but it does see playing Goblins. I think I would love to see this card unnerfed, or the nerf changed to it becoming a 2/1, which is the nerf I was originally lobbying for way back in Skyrim. Because the card, I will openly admit that 2 mana 2/2 Skulk was it was absurd. The card was way too good. But I think pushing it or dropping it to a 2/1 and leaving it at 2 at least made the card a lot more fair. It means it dies to pretty much anything that deals damage. It dies to Skaven, dies to Rapid Shot. You can ping it off with Sharpshooter Scouts. It can't trade into anything without dying. There's just so many ways of killing it nowadays, especially with goblins being a thing in the metagame. Goblin mirror matches would be a little bit more interesting, I think. It dies to curse effects, so Scout can kill it. DV would kill it on level 1. I just think 2 mana 2/1 Skulk will be a perfectly fine card in today's metagame. I don't think it would be oppressive. And if it was oppressive in Telvanni, just fucking nerf Firebloom. The card is dumb. I don't think anyone would be upset to see Firebloom pushed to 1 mana. The card is insane. It's a free removal spell that's actually pretty easy to control, especially in Telvanni. You've so many ways of removing threats, and then you can just Firebloom, kill the last thing on the board, draw 2 cards off your cat's paw. The card is dumb. That should be pushed to 1 if Skulk gets out of hand. And I think the last card I would like to see unnerfed or have its nerf changed is Disciple of Nemira. Again, to no one's surprise, this is a card I've been talking about for a long time. It's a card that never should have been hit. The card itself was never really an issue. It enabled Empire and Scout Abomination decks, but it wasn't the card that actually... While it was a key piece of those engines, it wasn't the enabler. I'll be talking about the enablers in a little bit, but Disciple of Nemira was the last good card draw tool for decks like Doomcrag. Doomcrag no longer exists. It's dead. The deck is unplayable without a decent draw engine. Faded Wraith is the only card that can potentially fill that role, but it's so slow and so inconsistent that Doomcrag just can't exist in the metagame right now. Getting Disciple back would allow people to at least have a bit of fun with Doomcrag again. Doomcrag was just essentially it was probably the fairest deck in the game. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that. You play a bunch of small dudes, give them lethal, clear your opponent's board. You play Journey at fucking turn 20, and then the game really starts. I don't think Doomcrag was ever oppressive. I don't think it ever needed to get its stuff hit, because Shrine got hit as well because it was too good in tricolors. So, yeah, just give Doomcrag fucking Disciple back. Disciple didn't hurt anyone. It was just a good card. The card that should have been nerfed in Abomination was actually Thieves' Guild Defense. This card was asking to break something, and always has been. I think the design is cool, honestly, but it was always going to break something or enable something degenerate. I think leaving the card, the mana cost, the stat line, and the effect text the same is fine. However, there should be an extra line of text at the bottom which says it cannot reduce cards below 1 mana. That would stop Abomination from being a thing. At least it would stop the Swindler's Markets abomination decks from being a thing, which is how Empire won. And it would still potentially allow Peta Max's scout build, which was not as obnoxious because they still had to do what Doomcrag did, which was cycle their entire deck and then win with Journey. But it still meant that at least you weren't going to get burnt out from nowhere with infinite market triggers from just infinite zero-cost cards in hand. So yeah, and a card I think that should share its fate with Thieves Guild Fence is naturally Transitive Shrine. Those two cards should both have that line of text on them that they can't reduce cards below 1 mana. It would stop degenerate things happening. It would stop degenerate. It would have just stopped Empire Abomination by doing that, and you could have left Disciple of Nemira alone. But yeah, sadly they just hit Nemira instead, which is unfortunate. And now we get to talk about nerfs. This is the part of the video everyone's been waiting for, and I'm God, you're going to be so happy that I'm going to be fucking talking about Invade straight away. So the first thing I want to talk about, as far as nerfs go, is I think, and I don't think anyone will disagree with me on any of these. Dromora Adept, Invasion Party, and Unexpected Arrival all bumped up by 1 mana, so Adept goes to 4, Invasion Party to 5, and Unexpected Arrival to 4. These 3 cards are the most criminally undercosted fucking pieces of shit in the game. I have no idea why they were made so cheap. It means that on turn 4, like, Invade is rolling keywords and getting massive mana discounts on everything. Invasion Party is an obnoxious card to play against, as is Unexpected Arrival. 3 mana to get a free 6 drop and with like 2-3 keywords on it is fucking stupid. Never should be a thing. And Adept just doubles gate levels and is very frustrating to play against as a 2 mana 4/3. Sorry, no, 2 mana 5/4. Sorry. But yeah, these cards, I think pushing them up by 1 mana at least slows down the potential of Invade decks to just high roll you out of the game by turn 4. It makes it a lot fairer. It gives you more time to get your removal online to at least deal with gates by slowing the deck down by a turn or 2. It doesn't really affect the playability of Invade too much. It just makes it a lot less unfair to play against and a lot less frustrating to deal with. And you know what? I feel bad for Invade players. All right, nerfing 3 of the best cards. So how about this? All right, how about we bury the hatchet, right? And we reduce the cost of Crisis Begins by 1. Crisis Begins is on here as a buff. Basically, the card is 6 mana. It should only cost 5. I have no idea why it's 6. The card is insanely expensive, and this buff is mainly just for Arena. This is like the worst. This is the single worst removal spell in Arena, but you still pick it because it's removal. Putting it to 5, I think, makes it at least playable. It's a Javelin that has some benefit in the Invade deck. Because, like, Jab is 5, mainly because of the Prophecy tag. You've got Edict of Azure at 4. I don't see why Crisis should be 6. I think it's perfectly fine at 5. I don't think anyone would be offended by that. Next up, we're going to talk about Yagram's Workshop. This card is a card I've not really seen too much since its release, but I do know that it leads to a lot of very unfun game states and can cause a lot of frustration when it comes to, like, just drawing a million cards or just doming you out of nowhere with Assembled Titan. And that is just not fun to play against. And honestly, fun factor when it comes to the game should be a concern when balancing. So I think Workshop should be pushed to 4 mana and potentially have its uses dropped to 2. I think either or is fine. I think reducing the amount of uses but keeping the mana cost the same is fine. And I think the flip side of that, like upping the cost but leaving the uses the same, I think that's perfectly fine as well. I think any combination of these changes would be beneficial. It would make the card a little bit less obnoxious. It would prevent you from going, turn 2 Workshop, turn 3, draw a million cards, turn 4 win, essentially. Again, it's a card I don't really have that many issues with. I just think, I think cards that cause unfun game states should be toned back a small bit. That's why I'm as hard as I am on Invade. Invade creates a lot of very unfun games, and it's the same thing with Workshop. Next up is a Mirkwater Skirmisher. Yes, a Goblin nerf. This card has always been one of the best cards when it comes to tribes in the game. There obviously there's not that many tribal decks. We've got like Dwemer, that's about it. They tried to make Skeleton Tribal a thing, but sadly there's like very few playable skeletons. And I think, like, even back in the day, Mirk Skirmisher was always an absurd card just for being able to push damage. So I have no problem with Goblin's damage output. I don't think that, like, that's the problem. My big issue with Goblins is that post Skirmisher, their boards are impossible to break with Ice Storm, and that is a massive issue for the game. If you think about Dwemer, 90% of a Dwemer board can be broken by Ice Storm even with halls in play, because it just affects toughness, or just affects the attack value. Skirmisher giving attack and toughness +2 is insane. Not only do they get to push a lot of damage, they also make their board insanely resilient, especially if they get a really fast opener with turn 1 Goblin, turn 2 Goblin, turn 3 Goblin Skirmisher. That's just insane. It means you're never winning that game because you're never breaking that board. So I think toning back Skirmisher to make it a +2/+1 buff, even making it a +1/+1 buff, I think would be okay. I would prefer that less because it weakens Goblins as a whole. I know people won't mind that because people don't like Goblins. I just don't think Goblins I don't think Goblins is as oppressive as most people make it out to be. I've played a lot of this game naturally, as you might assume, and I really don't have too many issues with Goblins as a deck. It's a very good deck. It's a very strong deck. It's a very well fleshed out deck, but I don't think it's as oppressive as people think it is. I think making the buff +2/+1, +2/+0, or +1/+1, any one of those changes I think would be perfectly adequate, just to make it a little bit easier to break Goblin boards after Skirmisher. Again, that's my biggest issue with the card. And the next card, and the final card I want to talk about in Nerfs, is Defensive Broomer. This card is probably the dumbest card they printed, or one of the dumbest cards they printed. It's a 0 mana Divine Fervor that gives everything guard. It's obnoxiously strong. Anyone who has lost to this card knows exactly what I'm talking about. Anyone who's played against Support Monk that runs it, it completely shuts out aggro. It wins you the game the turn you play it. It just wins you the game. That's it. There's nothing else to say about this card. It's so aggressively undercosted. I think by either upping the cost by 2 or using the nerf 5 on screen here by making it only reduce the cost by 1 per each creature of 5 health, I think pushes the card to become a lot more fair, because frequently you're paying 2 mana or 0 mana for the effect, and you're buffing an entire board. For anyone who's ever played against Support Monk or Midrange Tribunal running Defensive Broomer, you know exactly how unfun and how overpowered this card is. It completely shuts out aggro. Once Defensive Broomer comes down, aggro's completely out of the game, they can't do anything about it. It helps push ridiculous amounts of damage versus control, as well as making your board far bigger than your mid-range opponent's board, especially in Support Monk, where you have access to Divine Fervor on top of that, making Defensive Broomer pretty much always cost 0. The card is insane. I think making it reduce its cost by 1 or upping the cost to 6, while keeping the 2 cost reduction, would make the card so much more fair and still maintain playability at least. So yeah, that's something I think. Like, Defensive Broomer is like my biggest problem card in Jaws of Oblivion, basically, except for Invade, naturally, but that's an entire fucking mechanic. So yeah, that's all the nerfs, and I've got one more card to talk about, and this card is actually going to be a buff. So, as you guys know, I don't think Dominion or Daggerfall are particularly strong decks or tricolors. Dominion suffers from not really having a coherent playstyle. It does have a very good card in the form of Dominion Battle Reeve. The card is really, really solid. It's just everything else in the tricolor just doesn't really support any given playstyle. It has this weird burn motif to it, but it doesn't really work. But it does have at least a playable tricolor card that you're happy to include in your mid-range and aggro decks. However, Daggerfall doesn't really have a good tricolor card. Daggerfall Phantom is pretty much a vanilla 2/2, doesn't really have any text in 90% of the cases. Enchanted Ring is just really awkward and really slow. It takes so much work to get it to draw you a card that I don't think it's really worth it. Covenant Masterpiece is just unplayable, even after the buff. So 90% of the time, if I'm playing Daggerfall, the tricolor card I'm including is Emmerich. Emmerich is a decent creature. It's just a 9 mana removal spell, essentially, that occasionally leaves behind a 9/3 body. But I think Emmerich would be a lot better and would give Daggerfall a more coherent playstyle if you simply gave him Breakthrough. Giving Emmerich Breakthrough changes the dynamic of the card so much because it turns it into essentially a Melamnir-esque effect that also deals burn damage. Meaning, not only does Emmerich become a decent removal spell, he becomes a finisher, as well as a decent rage target, which helps to kind of solidify a playstyle for Daggerfall. Like a kind of a heavy mid-range rage deck, I think, would be very, very good in Daggerfall if Emmerich had Breakthrough. It would give you more finishing options for the deck, because right now, Ancana's like your best option, or Rage, but like you don't have that many good Rage cards. I just think giving Emmerich Breakthrough would make mid-range and controlled Daggerfall infinitely more playable by just giving them more like decent tools. Because like I said, there's no good tricolor card for Daggerfall, and at least giving him Breakthrough would make him infinitely more playable for most decks. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk about in this video. Just some card changes and just general card discussions. These have been on my mind for a long time. It's been a video I've been thinking about making for like forever. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy the video. Just remember, this is all hypothetical. This is all just my opinion. I'm very open to hearing what you guys think in the comments and telling me how wrong I am. I'm all for it. I'm here for that. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that nonsense, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.